In order to give you a better out-of-the-box experience, Modo 11 has seen a number of improvements that focus on initial interaction with the software and ease of use. On Windows, the installer now includes an option to start Modo after completing the installation process, and the application now installs using the correct Foundry naming convention. It's also now possible to run Modo in safe mode. This prevents custom configs, kits and plugins from loading, and it will not overwrite the main config on exit. This is particularly useful for running a vanilla Modo to test something without running the risk of destroying any UI customization. The Showcase window has been updated to now include HTML links to Image of the Week, training materials, content and quick tips, and also contains a utility section with quick access to recent projects and new scene and project setup. Also, Modo now ships with a range of Mesh Fusion assemblies. Emf Sweep allows you to quickly apply procedural sweeps to your Fusion item based on a profile curve. This curve can be quickly replaced with other profile presets or geometry to create specific shapes. Emf Slicer is an assembly that allows you to cut through a Fusion item. The slice can be defined with either 3 or 7 control points, allowing you to create complex part lines. The width of the cut and also the radius of the slice at each control point can be defined numerically. And finally, Emf Damage is an assembly that allows you to apply procedural damage effects to a Fusion item, which is ideal if you want to bake damage maps for your asset. Tool Huds have been added to every 3D viewport. They show a list of tools related to your selection mode. This list can be customized by either adding a tool using the plus button while a tool is running, or deleting a tool using the cross icon. Also, as you use tools, they are added to the HUD automatically, providing you with a growing list of favourites. Both of these lists can also be collapsed if required. The tool HUD can be moved around the viewport or locked in position using the viewport property options, and its visibility can be toggled on and off using Control-Tab, with the HUD reappearing at the cursor location. Snapping options no longer control grid display. This allows for the option of either having a fixed or dynamic grid that can be defined via the workplane menu. When set to fixed, you can define the size of the grid, and as you zoom in and out, it will not change. If, however, you zoom out to a point where the grid can no longer be displayed because it's too small, it'll temporarily become dynamic. Rendering in Modo 11 has also had many improvements. Cached irradiance values now have elliptical regions of influence rather than circular ones, allowing them to be spaced further apart, potentially saving render time and memory. And the Store Direct Light option has now been enabled by default due to its usefulness for applications like architectural interior rendering. Mesh lights and cylinder lights can now generate caustics like other direct light types, and mesh lights also have a new channel which locks the mesh light transforms to that of the prototype mesh. This means that you can now position the light by simply moving the prototype. A camera that is defined as a render camera now has its name drawn in bold and has an icon drawn next to it in the item list, and picking which camera to be the render camera can now be done by right-clicking and selecting Set as Render Camera from the menu. The maximum radiance render setting has been improved in Modo 11. It is now a unitless floating point number that acts as a multiplier for the most highly exposed render output in the scene. This means you no longer need to change the setting when changing the exposure. Occlusion Baking has been improved so that occlusion rays no longer hit the backside of polygons. This is particularly useful when baking geometry details into textures, when the detail is floating above the surface. The render property forms have also been updated. They now use form proficiency levels to hide many of the more advanced controls by default. Additionally, you can now save, delete and apply render presets from the Render Properties tabs. And finally, Motion Blur now supports procedural meshes, allowing you to render animated procedural meshes like you would regular geometry.